Good morning. This is Peg Larson, and we're going to talk about the policy bills that were just passed on Thursday in the Education Committee, and John Call will be with you shortly. In the Senate, they eliminated the National Assessment of Education programs from the World's Best Workforce, and the Senate bill is Senate File 2744, and it's approximately 160-some pages. Also in the Senate, they require districts to include guidelines for assessing and determining who is gifted and talented. They require schools to develop a site team with an equal number of teachers, administrators, and one parent. In the Senate also, they have a personal learning plan for students who cannot reach grade level proficiency by the third grade, and that's also in the House. In the House and the Senate, they have all schools must publish a list of the tests that are coming up by the first day of school. In the House, however, they do allow parents to opt out of the tests, and there will be a form. There's absolutely nothing left of No Child Left Behind in either bill, and the Senate has a staff development plan as being part of World's Best Workforce. And if you see kind of a theme here, the World's Best Workforce has taken over just about everything until ESSA comes to be sometime this summer. In the Senate, the children of the district have priority in open enrollment. And also they repeal the Commissioner's annual statewide average adjusted general revenue report. I believe that is in both bills. The Senate develops a student discipline task force, and since that is such a big issue right now, in both bills they require districts to report quarterly the number of seclusions you have for a student, and they make it very clear that prone restraints are not ever allowed to be used. In the Senate, they exclude the districts from the Uniform Municipal Contracting Law for a bidding process if the project exceeds $100,000. In the Senate, they develop a career and technical educator licensing task force, and a legislative task force, which means it's made up all of legislators, a task force for K through 12 teacher licensure, and that means that the legislators will be on it, but then they'll tap different groups to come in and give them their input. Teacher licensure obviously was a big deal again this year. It's beyond me why it can't do what they asked them to do, but I guess there's some technical glitches there. Finding teachers of color was a big initiative in both the House and the Senate, and many bills were heard on that. The need for role models in the classroom of teachers of color for students of color, and also for students, white students. They have a lot of different grants and programs that they've talked about, but that will all come out in, not this next week, but the week after that in the finance bills. This week, you had to have a bill through one house or the other, one body or the other, and then next week you have a chance to get it through the other body. However, Chair Erickson sent her bill to finance, so they'll be working on the financial part there. The House created a parental rights code where parents have the say over what happens to their student when they're in school, not just testing but other things. That was quite a contentious hearing. Representative Lucero had a bill that actually prevented students from having sex education, just about anything that parents had to opt into. And that was very controversial in the House hearing, and now there's not a whole lot left of it. But basically, it's just that they have a rights code. The plan for data security and personnel security was heard in both the House and the Senate, and it actually is according to state and federal guidelines of the SERPA. Diversity in staff was discussed, as I said, in both bodies. Representative Mariani had about 15 people testify as to the needs and people who have achieved highly, people of color, and that this is what they want for their students. And that did not go as Representative Mariani's bill into the House bill, but there are pieces of it in both bills. In the Senate changes Q Comp and rolls it into the world's best workforce. Schools have to do an equal access diversity report to the commissioner, and so that this is part of the push to get more teachers of color and administrators of color. There's changes in the licensure law, and this one came out of the House and the Senate in different forms, but the Board of Teaching is endorsing teachers that do concurrent enrollment, and also they eliminate the standard licensure, and they call it a professional 5-year license. And that was pretty controversial. Once again, the Board of Teaching did not testify a whole lot, but other people did in terms of why they can't allow people to easily get a license here in the state. And that was discussed, as I said, in both bodies. And now we will see what the finance bills look like. As I said, both Chair Erickson and Chair Uyghur will put together their bills, and Chair Uyghur is Chair of Finance and Policy, so he will just continue. And Chair Erickson sent her bill to the Finance Committee, so even though the finance deadline is not for a little while yet, her Chair Loon will be hearing different bills that were heard in Chair Erickson's committee, and quite truthfully, there weren't nearly as many bills heard in the House as were heard in the Senate. Chair Uyghur tried to hear just about every bill that was requested, whereas Chair Erickson kind of slimmed hers down to, I don't know how to put it, but she slimmed hers down to what she kind of wanted in her bill, and that's why it's so much smaller than the Senate bill. Well, here's John, and he has some updates for you too.
Hello everybody on a very windy Saturday morning. I'd like to talk first about the situation we have up here in St. Paul, and say first of all that Peg is a little bit too kind. Chuck Uyghur is hearing bills by Democrat members of his own caucus and Republicans. Everybody's getting a fair day. We have an outstanding author in the House of Representatives, a very well-respected bipartisan member named Kim Norton, who could not get hearings on several of our bills that she is carrying. So that does just strike a contrast in the way that these two chairs are approaching the business. Peg's too nice to say it, but I'm not. Peg talked a little bit about the first deadline coming and going. Normally, the first deadline that week is just chaotic from early in the morning until late at night. Now, the education committees, especially in the Senate, since Chuck Uyghur is hearing all the bills, he's been working pretty hard. This session is different than any one I can remember in 4 decades in terms of the overall level of activity in this final week leading up to the first deadline. Yesterday, I think by the Judiciary Committee was meeting in the Senate into the afternoon until about 3 o'clock. I think the Health and Human Service Committee met. I don't know if there was anything going on in the House that late. I'm not aware that there was anything going on. Normally they'd go till midnight. And normally during this week you'd have committees voting to go past midnight to get the bills done. But because of the constraints, such a short period for introducing, and the fact that everybody's got such low expectations, there was not that kind of chaos that you normally encounter. On policy bills, Peg's pretty well covered that. I'm especially appreciative of the efforts of Senator Greg Clausen, who represents Burnsville area, actually, for the good work he's done on that. Our bill, which would establish a task force to look at unfunded mandates. He's done an outstanding job of carrying that in the Senate. And even though it didn't get in the House side, it's been a very popular bill in every committee it's gone through. and I think it's got a good shot in conference committee. Prognosis for this session. I'm not seeing a transportation bill yet. I'm not seeing a tax bill. Bonding bill, it would really be embarrassing if they couldn't do a bonding bill, but right now the pieces aren't there to even to make that come together. I think if there's any hope for any kind of optimism, there are some uncontroversial things in the education bill that might just get done. So don't give up hope yet. We're just telling you the facts. One other interesting thing about this session is, and Peg and I have talked about this, accessibility is tougher because things are so split up, and the construction zone is another issue. But the new facet of this, of the new Capitol complex with a Senate office building, is the distances are much greater. I have a Fitbit, and I've been averaging 3.5 miles a day, and I've gone up to 5 miles on some days. My record for flights of stairs was 26. All the lobbyists and legislators are looking a little thinner this session because of that. I'd like to even though Peg and I are frustrated with the process this year, I'd like to end on a somewhat optimistic note again, that at least we are hopeful that something will happen in the way of an education bill. And even though we didn't get much of what we wanted into the House bill because of the constraints the chair put on that process, I am hopeful we will do well, much better on the Senate side. So we're still alive in conference committee. So stay tuned. We're working hard. We'll see what we can make happen for the district. Thank you.